At my mother-in-law's birthday party, after my son turned our family into his business launch, the priest handed me the microphone. My daughter-in-law had wanted me kept away from it. But I didn't have a speech. I had a red folder. This is the story of how the loudest voice at a family gathering isn't the one that shouts, but the one that speaks the truth. Some people think being silenced is the same as being unseen. It is not. I have learned, on this coast, that silence is often a working noise. A pot rolled onto the next burner, a bin of mussels lifted without complaint, a register tape torn off with a neat rip. When a woman like me goes quiet, it is not surrender. It is attention. It is the kind of listening you do with a pencil in your hand, the ledger open, the kettle nudging toward boil. If you've ever stood in a kitchen at 5 a.m. in June and heard the harbor breathe, the gulls arguing over what they won't share, the masts ticking against themselves like polite spoons, you know that the loudest thing in a town can be the person who says nothing until it matters. My name is Clara McKinnon. I am 58, a widow, and I run a 6-room B&B that rests above a chowder and supper place my husband and I opened the year before our son lost his baby teeth. The sign out front is cedar, hand-painted, plain, harbor house, rooms and chowder. We're 2 blocks from the Lunenburg waterfront, close enough that the gulls audition for your breakfast whether you ask them to or not. Upstairs is where guests sleep. Downstairs is where fish becomes soup and bread becomes patience. The office is a narrow alcove behind the kitchen. 2 filing cabinets, a battered desk with a drawer that sticks, a corkboard where receipts and reminders and the occasional prayer coexist without arguing. My day starts at 4:45. That is not heroic. It is ocean logic. I set the kettle. I crack the back door for the first air. I check the walk-in. 2 degrees. Bless it. I log the temperatures because Fraser Health may belong to British Columbia, but food safety belongs to mothers, and I will not serve something I wouldn't put in the mouth of the child I still see in my son's shoulders when he forgets himself. I run my eye over the prep list. Onions, celery, carrots chopped and ready. Potatoes peeled into a bucket of cold water. Haddock fillets tucked in hotel pans. Mussels sleeping in the cooler with a damp towel and a note that says, "Wash twice." Cream delivered last night sits like a promise. I grind coffee and listen to the grinder's honesty. I write the date on the little board by the pass. I put the batter for brown bread in the proofer and make sure the oven reads the truth. At 6, I put on the chowder. The room receives the smell the way a church receives the first hymn. By 7, the guests begin to come down in their socks, polite and hungry. I pour coffee into hands that traveled to get here. The dining room windows catch the kind of light painters pretend is invented. I have a way of seeing what a person is ready to carry, based on how they hold a mug. If they need a quiet breakfast, I bring toast and say nothing. If they want to talk, I ask how the road treated them, and the road always supplies an answer. A moose seen in the wrong place, fog thicker than a plan, a kindness at a gas station in a town with 1 street. At 9, I change the sheets. Each bed a small argument won without raising my voice. Evan is my son. He is 33 and can sell a story faster than I can fold a fitted sheet. He moved back from Halifax 2 summers ago with a laptop and a loud idea that the future was ready to shake hands with Lunenburg if we would only make a reel of it. His wife, Talia, is 31 and looks at rooms the way a person looks at a camera lens. What can be shown? What should be hidden? What needs to be moved 2 inches to the left so the eye forgives it? She is the kind of brave that gives speeches in rooms that don't need them. I do not dislike her. I dislike the way her sentences walk around mine and don't notice I'm there until a problem needs a mother. They started with reasonable things. Evan redesigned the website. It loaded quickly and showed the rooms without apologizing for their honest wood and their lack of drama. Talia took photos of bowls of chowder that made the cream look like it had been on a journey worth telling. She started an email list called Harbor Notes and wrote about the fog like it was a neighbor with moods. Bookings ticked up. I gave thanks the way you do in kitchens, through work, not words. Then ideas grew a louder coat. They suggested we host a listening night in the off-season. A local fiddler, a dozen people, soup and bread, a glass of wine. I pointed to permits, to insurance, to the reality that a licensed dining room is not the same as an events bar. "We'll handle the details," Talia said, in a tone that assumed the details would be charmed into behaving by the right dress. "We'll do a pop-up at the wharf," Evan said. "Soft launch, family first." Family first is a phrase that has battled both good and evil in this town. I folded napkins and asked what day they had in mind. "The Saturday of Nana's 80, Talia said. She smiled like a person who believes coincidence is an ally. I looked at the calendar on my phone and then at the wall calendar, and the dates matched the way trouble always matches when it pretends to be progress. If I had only the one insult, I might have let it roll down the counter and smash on the floor so I could sweep it up with the rest of the day. But insults travel in pairs. A group chat appeared. Family only minus me. I know because my sister-in-law, who is better at secrets than silence, showed me her screen. "Let Mum be the face," Talia wrote. "We'll handle the brand voice. Keep her off the mic so she doesn't confuse policy." A video followed, taken in our dining room, where I stood with a ladle and a smile that felt like mine. In the final cut, I introduced the soup and then vanished, replaced by Evan's line about Harbor House events by Evan and Talia. They meant to keep me. They meant to keep me quiet. I went down to the office and cleaned the drawer rails with a dry bar of soap so the drawer would agree to be useful, because staying angry is wasteful in a building that needs you to tighten the hinge. Then I opened my email. There I found the soft launch invitation Evan had sent to a sponsor Talia had charmed, a craft spirits company in Halifax, promising exclusive access to Harbor House for an intimate dockside tasting. There was no dock at Harbor House, only the public wharf 2 blocks away and my kitchen, which was not built to host an ambition wearing heels. He had attached a deck with a new logo, Harbor House Events by Evan and Talia. No Clara. The website had shifted without my permission. The old logo was covered by a clean, uncommitted font. The business name was mine. The brand had been stolen by a sentence. I checked the bank. There's a sound a heart makes when it recognizes a charge it did not choose. It is not dramatic. It is a small sinking, the kind you feel at a cenotaph. On the supplementary card, I do not give freely. There were purchases. A pair of powered speakers, a rack of LED uplights, a box of stemless glassware, a rolled canvas backdrop of a wave that looked like a motion sickness advertisement, and an invoice for a content creator's event package. I printed the list and circled each with a steady pen because circles are more helpful than exclamation marks. On the shelf above the desk are the binders that save us, HST filings, payroll stubs, staff schedules, the food safety plan. I wrote by hand and then typed the liquor license and its conditions, the insurance policy with the clause circled that says events need extra coverage and written approval. I pulled the food safety binder and checked the section on sampling. Designated area only hand wash sink within reach, labeled allergens, time controls. I pulled the license and read the line that says, entertainment must be incidental to food and may never be an event disguised as dinner. I took the insurance policy and underlined the part that makes me sleep when the wind says the power will go, no coverage for unsanctioned events. I don't sleep long on nights like this, but paper is a pillow that doesn't lie. That night, Evan and Talia came upstairs like people arriving for a party. Evan kissed my cheek and called me our anchor, the way a person does when they plan to drag you. Talia held up a mock-up on her phone, a plan for the room with a bar corner and VIP nooks in a place where people come to eat fish and feel the hour land on them quietly. We'll test at the family gathering, she said. Nana's 80 will be the soft launch. It'll mean so much to have your blessing in front of everyone. Then we'll roll into summer with the sponsor on board. I set the 2 bowls of chowder on the table. I passed the bread. I said nothing. Sometimes a silence is a dignified refusal written in soup steam. They mistook silence for consent. They used the group chat to confirm the program for the night at the church hall. Speeches, a slideshow, then their quick unveiling. I watched the notifications arrive without opening them. I set the fry for the fish cakes, squeezed the potatoes through the ricer with a rhythm that has carried me through funerals, and one terrible New Year's Eve when the pipes objected. I did not argue. Arguing would have fed a different kind of hunger than the one I am willing to encourage in my family. In the morning, I stood at the sink and scaled haddock with the exact same pressure as always. After breakfast service, I walked down to the wharf and bought mussels from a man who knows more about grief than anyone should, and who expresses it by sorting shellfish with a reverence that suggests prayer. "How's the boy?" he asked. "Full of ideas," I said. He nodded the nod of men who have watched boats go out in fog. "The sea loves ideas," he said. "She chews them quiet." On the way back, I stopped at the bank. The manager is a woman whose voice knows how to fit into a church and a kitchen, which is to say she measures her words. I asked for dual signatures on any transfer over 500 and a review of online users. "Put it in writing," she said. I did. I removed Evan's access. I asked for alerts on e-transfers. I asked for a paper letter because a paper letter is harder to misremember than a text. I walked to the insurance office and sat on a chair that felt like it had held all the women who live between fear and compliance. "If a sponsor shows up on Saturday with bottles," I asked, "are we covered?" "Not without an event endorsement," the broker said. "Not without your written approval as named insured." He printed a letter with that language and had me sign it to acknowledge receipt. I walked to the liquor licensing office and asked about incidentals versus events. The clerk, patient as shore rocks, explained what I already knew. I took her card because the shape of a card strengthens a sentence. I phoned the environmental health office and booked a routine inspection for Friday morning, not because I was worried, because a signed sheet posted near the pass speaks louder than my mouth in a room where my son thinks microphones are the way truth is validated. I cleaned the hand-washing sink to a shine I would show a stranger. I measured sanitizer. I wrote pass in neat writing because messy writing insults the person who asked you to be careful. That evening, I found the email from Talia to a craft spirits company. "Exclusive access," she wrote. "Partnership with Harbor House Events by Evan and Talia. Soft launch Saturday. Family unveiling." She attached a media kit with photos of my dining room and the alley behind the kitchen, pretending to be a service courtyard. She promised things we did not own. I printed it and slid it into a red folder I labeled in slow letters. Facts, not feelings. Into that folder, I put the bank letter, the insurance letter, the food safety plan, the liquor license, the health inspection confirmation, a printout of the business registration that says the name is mine, and a photo of the cedar sign because a name carved once is still a name. Clothes in a laundry basket can break a day if you push your foot into the heap and decide to call it a failure. I folded towels like a person with a plan. I wrote on an index card, "The list of things I will not let be taken from this house. The right to say no. The right to decide what a dining room is for. The right to not be put on a stage when all I want is to ladle soup and let people go home smelling like butter and sea." I put the card in the red folder because even stubbornness likes a sleeve. The next morning, the inspector came at 9 sharp. Young, hair in a bun that says her mother raised her to keep it out of food, clipboard ready. We walked the kitchen. She checked the hand wash sink, the probe thermometer, the sanitizer test. She looked at the allergen sign. She nodded at the clean labels in the cooler. "Sampling?" she asked. "At the pass only," I said, "with controls." "No alcohol service without endorsement," she said. "None planned," I lied, and then prepared to make the lie true. She signed the sheet, left me a copy, and said to tell my son that health inspectors do not hate reals. They hate norovirus. I laughed like a person who needed to remember that offices contain humor too. When I posted the inspection report beside the pass, Evan wandered in. He looked at it the way a child looks at a chart he has ignored. "We passed," he said, like he was in the we. "We pass because we prepare," I said. He had a box of glassware under his arm and the grin of a man who believes in scenes. "The sponsor is sending a few cases," he said, "just for tasting. How special will this be for Nana? Imagine the photos." I thought of my mother-in-law's hands clasped in her lap, the blue veins like maps that don't lead to the kind of place where a woman likes being used as a backdrop. "No," I said. He treated my no like a coaster. He set his cup on it and kept talking. I did not raise my voice. I cleaned the stovetop with a patience that comes from scrubbing grief out of corners. I cut carrots into coins that don't waver in a bowl. I stirred the chowder and remembered the year the herring were thick, and Bill came home with a joy I swallowed because the pot wouldn't watch itself. I held my silence. I don't know what other people put in the silence. I put prayer. Not the church kind, the stove kind. On Saturday morning, the day of the family gathering, the harbor wore its best face. Water a color you don't get to keep. Sky honest. The tourist buses still deciding whether to be annoying. I made extra chowder in case the cousins came for lunch. I baked a batch of gingerbread with lemon sauce ready because you cannot stop arguments with sugar, but you can encourage people to sit down long enough to realize they are full of the wrong kind of hunger. I printed 3 copies of the inspection report and put one in my folder, one on the pass, one by the sink for when someone would decide to challenge me out loud. At noon, Talia swept in and took a lap of the room with her eyes. "We have the backdrop," she said, cheerful. "We'll set it up at the hall after the slideshow." "No backdrop," I said, gentle but very near the floor of my bit of patience. She patted my arm like a person taming a pet. "Mum," she said, "let us handle the mood." Mood is a poor substitute for compliance. I checked the reservations list for who needed late checkout and wrote a note for the cleaner to hold room 4 until 2, because the guests had asked. And the best kind of power is the kind that uses itself to make someone else's day easier. We walked to the church hall at 4 with the molasses cookies I promised my sister-in-law and a stack of plates that once belonged to Nana, before she decided plates have to earn their keep. Family arrived in that awkward cluster of greetings and coats and folding chairs people take too seriously. The hall smelled like coffee and floor wax. A table held photos of men with hats and women whose hair did not dampen in humidity. Nana sat in a place of honor, this being her 90th year, though the invitation persists in calling her 80 because certain numbers scare people. She wore her blue dress and the brooch that has survived more weddings than most vows. We ate potluck. We laughed where laughter was expected. The slideshow showed my husband as a boy holding a fish the size of his future, and my son as a child with cake smeared where pride belongs. Then came the moment I understood I had been moving toward since the first time I heard my name mispronounced into a microphone. Evan took the mic and tapped it to wake the room. Talia stood a step behind him, smoothed her hair, and lifted the corner of a canvas that waited like a curtain craving a stage. "Before we sing, a quick surprise," Evan said. "We're excited to announce a new chapter, Harbor House Events by Evan and Talia. We'll be showcasing tonight with our sponsor, just a taste, and then this summer we'll bring more music and evenings to the waterfront. Mum will be our heart, of course, our heritage." He said heritage the way a realtor says cozy, when a room won't let you turn around wearing a coat. I watched the room go still. In stillness, a person's eyes show you the math they are doing. I took the red folder from my tote and did the one thing everyone who loves me knows I do before I speak. I arranged the papers in the order I want my voice to land. "Before you unveil," I said, not into the mic, just into the room where bread has trained voices to be kind, "I need to note a few truths." The priest, who has seen more family dramas than the average therapist, handed me the mic anyway, because kind does not have to mean quiet. I set the red folder on the lectern and opened it like we open the pass at 11. Clean towel, sharp ladle, steady hand. I did not give a speech. I read sentences for the benefit of the part of the room that respects print more than tears. Business registration, Harbor House, Clara McKinnon. I showed the paper. Liquor, no events without endorsement approved by owner. I showed the policy. Insurance, No coverage for unsanctioned events. I showed the broker's letter. Food safety, sampling only at the designated pass with hand wash access, no pop-up bar. I held the inspection report, signed yesterday, and the health officer's card. Banking, dual signatures. Any transactions over 500 require my hand. I kept my hand on the page to make the sentence literal. Website and brand name usage. Cease and desist sent. I let the room see my handwriting on a copy, the neat calm of a woman who will not be dared into messiness. I took a breath so the oldest people could adjust their hearing aids and the youngest could adjust their opinion of what a mother sounds like when she has had enough. Then I said something that did not belong to paper. This isn't about being old-fashioned, I said, and I let my eyes find Nana's and settle there, because we practice the truth best on someone who taught us to tell it. It's about not promising things we don't own. It's about a dining room that feeds fishers after storms. It's about the time we comped 10 meals when the ferry stranded a bus and the tourists look like they'd rather be anywhere else. This is a house where soup is the loudest thing. If there will be a bar, it will be a bar of soap at the sink. A laugh rose and sat down again, the kind of laugh that forgives people because they tried. I closed the folder. I put my hand on top of it like prayer without a church. I turned to Nana and said, "If anyone speaks tonight, it should be you." She lifted her chin and said in a voice that has chased men off wharves and invited them back for cake, "Sing me a hymn." No backdrops. The room obeyed because you do not disobey a woman who has outlived 3 storms and 2 mayors. They did not drop the canvas. They did not pour anything. I did not dance on anyone's ego. I stepped back into the room like a tide that will return when called. That is where we will pick up next. Not at a microphone, but back at a counter, where a woman who has been told to be quiet will make the kind of noise that cannot be edited out of a reel. Signatures, logs, bank letters, and the sound of a ladle tapping the rim of a bowl. There are ways to be loud that don't break a room. I intend to use every one of them. There's a kind of courage they don't teach in speeches. It's the courage that folds napkins square when your hands are shaking, that tests the sanitizer and writes pass with tidy letters even when your heart is arguing for a louder gesture. After the night at the church hall, after Nana chose a hymn over a backdrop and I read rules instead of begging, I could have climbed the thin staircase, lay on the bed that knows my shape, and let the room tell me I'd done enough. But kitchens breed a different faith. You don't stop because the soup tasted right once. You stop when the pot is washed, the ladle is hung, and the mop water runs clear. That is how I decided to carry the quiet of my speech into the kind of paperwork that does not applaud but does remember. Morning came with its ordinary demands. The walk-in read 2 degrees, faithful as a promise. I logged it. I cracked the back door and let the harbor air lay its cool hand on the kitchen. The gulls had opinions. I fed none of them. I put the chowder on to warm slowly, stirred with the kind of patience you save for the second day when flavors learn each other's names. The coffee grinder did its honest work, and the first guest appeared in wool socks, blinking, ready to believe again that breakfast is a civilizing force. I poured, smiled, and kept the ledger on the corner of the pass, open to the page that would catch the day before it slipped from use into story. It would have been easy, with the family quieted and the backdrop folded in its bag like an apology, to accept a truce built on embarrassment. But truce without terms is a long fuse. I cleaned the pass, set the brown bread in to bake, and after the last plate left the kitchen, I took my red folder from the drawer and set it in the light. I have never owned a sword. This is what I carry. I began with the bank because money is the river other people try to swim your life in. I walked to the branch 2 streets over, the one with the carpet that forgives fishermen and the tellers who ask about Nana by name. The manager, a woman whose hair never lies, waved me into her small office. I placed my driver's license, the business registration, and the red folder on her desk like ingredients we both understood. I'll need the dual signature setting confirmed on all outgoing transfers over 500, I said. and I'd like alerts for any e-transfer attempted without my approval. She clicked and printed and slid a form across the desk, the paper stiff with helpfulness. And, I added, remove Evan's online user access for now. He'll be paid hours like anyone else. If he needs to see a number, he can ask me to show it to him in the daylight. She didn't look surprised. She asked for my signature twice, and I gave it like a person writing her own name exactly where it belongs. Before I left, I asked for a letter on letterhead confirming the changes. "You like paper," she said, half smiling. "I like things I can tape to a wall," I replied. "Insurance next." The broker's office is small and crowded with files that smell faintly of winter coats. He greeted me with a pen already in hand. I showed him the sponsor email and the mock-ups and the words, "exclusive access," that had no business standing near my dining room. "Without an event endorsement and your consent, there's no coverage," he said, underlining a line on the declarations page with the satisfaction of a man whose underline is a moral act. "I'll write a letter that says exactly that, with dates. Add," I said, "that any alcohol served must be served under the conditions of our license, and that tastings are sampling only in the designated area with hand wash access, not at the wharf, not in a pop-up, not under a rented string of lights." He wrote while I spoke, and I watched the letter take shape, a small boat I could launch against the tide of someone else's optimism. On my way back, I stopped at Service Nova Scotia to ask, politely, tiredly, about permits that had been discussed in rooms I do not host. A woman behind the counter with the calm of a person used to translating hope into forms explained again the difference between a licensed dining room and an event space. "Incidental music?" she said. "Possible. Ticketed event?" She tilted her hand to mean no. "Owner approval?" She tapped the counter. "Always." She printed the regulation for me. I thanked her in the currency bureaucrats prefer: accuracy. I returned to the kitchen with paper layered like pastry in my folder. Lunch was light. 2 bowls for a couple from the prairies, bread for a man who swore he'd only ever eat bread made by someone who could tell him what the oven had done yesterday. I sent them off softened and turned to the office. Cease and desist letters are a genre I hoped never to learn to write, but there I was, drafting 2. One to the Craft Spirits Company. No brand activations, tastings, or promotional events at Harbor House without a written site agreement signed by me as owner, proof of insurance naming us as additional insured, and confirmation of compliance with licensing and food safety. Any assertions of exclusive access are inaccurate and must be removed from your materials. One to the hosting platform where Evan and Talia had quietly changed our profile name. Harbor House Events by Evan and Talia is not a registered business name associated with our license. Restore our legal name or remove the listing. I printed both and took them to the post office for registered mail because stamps carry more authority when they leave a bruise. Then I did something that felt dramatic only because I am an appliance of moderation. I called my lawyer. She is younger than me and older than nonsense. I told her what had happened at the hall and what would happen if this continued to be a story that tried to sell itself. She invited me in that afternoon, and I brought the red folder because I don't know how else to travel anymore. She read the papers, made neat stacks, and drew a square on a legal pad labeled Trust. "Not to decide today," she said, "but to prepare. If you want Harbor House to remain a house, you can put it where a speech cannot steal it." We talked through conditions I had already scribbled on index cards. Room rates capped enough that a family could afford a stack of bowls and sleep, a clause about feeding crews in storms without being noble about it, employment preference for staff who stayed through years when tourists didn't. She drafted language for a simple family trust. For later, when I wanted protection to live here without having to harden into someone who used to be held. We also wrote a short letter to Evan and Talia. No more use of the name without permission. No more charges to the supplementary card. No more public announcements without my signature. The letter was not a scold. It was a fence. Evan came by just as I was slid the last tray of rolls into the oven. He had the buoyancy of a man who assumes the world will forgive him for rehearsals because the show will be so charming. "Sponsors offering to reschedule," he said, as if this demonstrated maturity. They loved the vibe. "What a room, Mum. We can do our first tasting next Saturday. We'll keep it small. Family tables, soft music. Nothing crazy. You said your piece. We heard you. We'll be careful." I lifted a roll to test the underside and listened to the quiet that bread makes when it's nearly ready. "No," I said, placing it back. He laughed. "Mum, don't be stubborn. This is good for us." "No tastings," I said. "No events, no sponsor, not now, not until the paper aligns with what you announce, not until you stop treating my name like a stage prop." He shifted into the kind of politeness that cuts. "Sometimes you get emotional on camera," he said. "It's hard to guide modern audiences through that." "Modern audiences," I echoed, tasting the phrase. "They're people who eat soup. I'll guide them to a spoon." He sighed. "We can control the rollout if you let us handle it. Just don't—" He gestured vaguely at the air. "Don't make waves." I looked at him and thought of the tide deciding what matters, and then I said, "Waves are for boats. This is a house." Talia arrived before dinner service with a ring light and the type of optimism that wears heels to a kitchen. "Quick shot for the grid," she said, already angling the camera. "Say heritage." I set down my knife. "Say owner," I said. She froze, smile held like a plate. "Mum, you're making this personal." "It is personal," I said, not unkind. "My name is carved into the sign. My fingerprints are on every spoon that goes out. My bank account paid for the roof when the salt tried to eat it. It's personal enough to file." I handed her a copy of the letter we had sent by registered mail. "This is the personal I'm practicing." The week evened itself the way weeks do when a town has learned to run on rhythms rather than promises. We served chowder, rolled rooms, turned down sheets, and set aside 2 bowls on Thursday night for a pair of deckhands who came in smelling of diesel and gratitude. I wrote a note to myself to update our staff manual, where to place the allergen card, how to refuse a request for a pop-up politely without apologizing for it, what sentence to use when a guest says, "But the website said," "Our house runs on the rules posted here. We're happy to feed you. We can recommend music after you eat." Nora, our morning server, practiced it until it sounded like something that had been born in her own mouth. We printed it and taped it inside the cupboard door. On Friday, the health inspector came for the routine inspection I had scheduled before the hall. She was brisk and kind and wrote her neat initials on the line I hoped for. Food contact surfaces, clean, probe thermometer, calibrated, hand wash, accessible. She glanced at the corner where someone had once wanted to set a bar and smiled without malice. "And here," she said, tapping the line that would do more to quiet a sponsor than any speech I could give. "Sampling only at the pass. Owner approval required for any variation." I copied the report and posted it where eyes rest when they wait for soup. Saturday morning, I wrote a list labeled sacrifices, because a ledger for pain is a way to be sure you are not romanticizing it. I wrote, "Sold Peter's pickup the year the roof sulked. Bought the new dishwasher after the old one made us carry plates like apologies. Paid Evan's first-year tuition when he could not ask. Fed the harbor the week the ferry stranded 2 busloads. Did payroll in a blackout by the light of a candle that smelled like something we never would have bought if we had known how expensive it would be to stand there and pretend to be calm." Below that, I wrote another list, what they forget, that we are allowed to refuse beautiful ideas if they cost us the room, that soup can be an event, that Nana's laugh is a permit we respect more than any printed one, that people do not come to Lunenburg to meet ring lights, that a house that feeds you is more modern than a bar that tests you. Bryn wasn't in this story, Talia was, but the cousin tree has many branches. A message drifted through a relative. "We were just trying to make you look good, Aunt." I breathed and replied with the line I wanted repeated correctly. "Make the room honest, and I am good." It felt like a theological statement in a town that trusts fish more than theology. By Monday, the registered letters had landed. The spirits company replied with a carefully drafted email. We apologize for any misunderstanding. We will remove references to exclusivity and will not proceed without a signed site agreement. We appreciate your commitment to compliance. I printed it and slid it into the folder between insurance and health because that is where contrition belongs. Saved, not sung about. The hosting platform changed our profile name back within hours. A friend texted me a screenshot with a heart. I texted back a photo of soup ladled into a bowl and wrote, I prefer this icon. Not everything was tidy. Evan and Talia did what cornered ambition does. They doubled down on tone. They posted about tradition meeting innovation, about tender stewardship of heritage, about respectful evolution, a phrase that made even the floor frown. A cousin shared a reel that used footage from our dining room without asking. I wrote the cousin a note. Permission is a spice you can taste. Ask next time. He apologized and took it down. Small field, high fences. In the middle of the week, a man from town who organizes the Lunenburg Fishermen's Aid Supper stopped by with a flyer. We're short of bowls, he said. Any chance you can lend yours for Saturday? The supper is a fundraiser that builds quiet favors into a fund for bad weeks. I said yes before he finished the sentence. He asked if we'd like to ladle a station, chowder or fish cakes or just help wipe. We'll bring chowder, I said. We'll bring rolls. We'll bring hands. As soon as he left, I understood the story had set its own stage. The sponsor had wanted a launch. We would have a public thing of our own, nothing branded, everything witnessed, a room larger than a family and kinder than a camera. I wrote Fisherman's Aid in capital letters on the calendar and underlined it once, the way you do for a birth date. That night, Evan came up the back stairs without Talia and stood in the kitchen doorway like a man who had found the room he meant to enter and needed to borrow the sentence to do it. The counselor who came to Nana's told me I should talk to you, he said, which must have cost him something. He said, rooms like this don't need events. They are the event. He rubbed his jaw. I can help without being in charge, he added, each word tasting new in his mouth. You can help, I said, and did not rush the end of the sentence. You can take the early deliveries on Saturday. You can set chairs at the hall for the fundraiser. You can wash bowls between seatings. You can take a turn at the sink and not claim it on a grid. He nodded. And the money I charged, he said. I'll pay it back, not posts. Cash. E-transfer to the account in my letter, I said. First of the month. He nodded again and looked at the floor with a relief that had edges. Ooh, the days between a decision and its demonstration have a way of testing resolve. Talia sent a long text about respect and optics and how hard it is to build something in a small town when people cling to the past. I replied with one line, we're building supper. She didn't answer. She doesn't like the way nouns deny drama. Friday evening, I set the kitchen as if a stern teacher would inspect it in the night. Flour in a lidded bin, onions sacked, potatoes soaking, mussels rinsed and set in the cooler, cream counted, bread portioned, salt sane. I printed the health inspection again and slipped it under the magnet shaped like a whale on the side of the pass. I sharpened knives, washed towels, and placed the red folder on the shelf above the desk. Not because I needed it tomorrow, but because knowing it was there, fat with confirmations and polite refusals, made me stand taller. At dawn on Saturday, the harbor pretended it had never met wind. I opened the kitchen, turned on the ovens, and warmed the chowder to a shy simmer. Evan arrived at 6, hair unstudied, hands in pockets like a teenager called to lift. He lifted. He carried trays like a man remembering his back. He took delivery from the dairy and initialed the slip with the cautious pride of someone who understands that ink can behave like dignity. Thank you, I said, and let the words settle where compliments should. On work, not credits. By 8, we had sent the first bowls to room guests, and after 9, we were stacking Cambros in the back of the old hatchback for the hall. The fundraiser hums at a frequency that forgives planning sins. People came with muffins and energy and a willingness to be told where to put things. The kitchen there is bigger than my whole downstairs and less intimate. We made it ours with towels and lists. The leader, a woman with arms like the mast of a boat, handed me a ladle and a spot at Station 3. Evan took the dish pit. Talia arrived late, hair pinned, eyes skittish. She stood near the door and looked like repentance, glancing at a menu. I handed her a stack of tickets, the good kind, perforated and domestic. "You'll tear these," I said. "Say thank you, like you mean it." She nodded and set her ring light beside the wall and did not turn it on. The room filled with townspeople and tourists and the kind of chatter that is less about words and more about remaining human. Bowls went out. Bowls came back. The dish pit argued with the noise, and Evan argued back with hot water and patience. At the far end of the hall, I recognized the sponsor's rep. Neat jacket, polite shoes, expression of a person looking for a marketing angle. He spotted me, approached with a well-practiced smile, and extended a hand. "We'd still love to," he began. I nodded toward Station 5, where they were short 2 volunteers, and handed him a towel. "Help us carry," I said. "We can talk after." He did. He carried. He sweated. He learned more about the room in an hour than any deck could have taught him. Halfway through the second seating, Nana arrived in her blue dress, escorted like a naval hero. The room stood without needing to be asked. She waved us down with the immodest authority of someone who has never needed a microphone. "Eat," she said, "then sing." We ate and did not sing because bowls waited and tickets wanted tearing. But her voice routed through the air, reminding us what all this is for, keeping people fed, keeping a shoreline from forgetting itself when other lights beg your attention. When the last bowls were washed and the floor mopped to that singular shine that tells you the day will permit your sleep, the sponsor rep came to find me. "We'll send cans," he said, breath still climbing his chest. "Packaged. Ingredients listed. You can sell them beside the jam if you want. No events. We'll write it up, clean, if you'll have it." I looked at the towel in his hands, grayed with the work of an afternoon. "Send the note," I said. "I'll tape it to the wall when I sign." Evan came up behind me, dish pit soaked, and stood without presenting himself for praise. "I get it," he said, voice low, the way people speak in the liminal space where the day stops yelling and starts confessing. "The room is the point." I nodded. "The room is the point," I said, "and the people in it." Talia passed with a coil of tickets and eyes that had learned something new about lines. "I'll help count," she said, "and then I'll go mop our kitchen." I let the pronouns sit there and behave. We packed up in the kind of quiet that doesn't ask for reassurance. Back at Harbor House, I put the Cambros on the counter, set the ladles to dry, and turned off the oven with a gesture that felt like writing my name. The red folder sat above the desk, still useful, not needing a performance. I touched its spine, not to take anything out, to thank it for learning how to keep me loud without raising my voice. There's one thing left which is not a cliffhanger so much as a place to stand. If you've lived in a town where the sea names the holidays, you know that summer brings a moment when everyone who ever had an opinion about your life appears with a fork. The Harbor Committee is planning the Harbor Day Supper, a bigger version of what we did today, with more eyes and a raffle and a microphone with a cord that trips the tired. The cousins will come. The sponsor will attend with his clean note. The priest will say, "Grace." The mayor will look like a man trying to deserve his chain. That is where I will do the last, necessary thing. Not scold, not shame, announce. Not a brand, a policy. The kind that can be posted and pointed at by any woman too tired to argue. Because when they tried to silence me, I learned the trick of saying the loudest true thing in a room and then backing it with paper. And when the room is a town, you come prepared to feed it and to keep it honest in the same breath. Some endings don't thunder. They arrive like a posted notice. Square corners, black print, the comfort of rules that will still be true when the room empties. After the Fisherman's Aid supper, after the sponsor carried trays and learned humility has a temperature, I could feel the air around Harbor House change. It wasn't relief. It was alignment. The chairs sat where chairs should be. The knives were back on the magnet, shining without showing off. Evan slept late the next morning and still made the dairy delivery. Talia washed the front windows before opening and did not photograph the rag. The red folder above my desk, not an idol, not an argument, had become what I meant it to be, a spine. There was one public thing left, and then the house, which feeds other people's hunger, could go back to doing its job. Harbor Day is the kind of small-town pageant that makes cynical people loud. I've never found it embarrassing. When a town circles itself and names what keeps it alive, the naming has a utility I respect. It happens in August when the water pretends to be tame and tourists think they've discovered something. Tents on the green, booths for raffles and pies, a stage you can trip over if you walk through your own thoughts too deep. The Harbor Committee runs the supper in the evening. Papered tickets, long tables, borrowed crock pots, church lady coffee strong enough to make a man rethink his politics. In the afternoon, there's a ceremony. The mayor speaks, the priest blesses. The committee chair thanks everyone for putting away folding tables last year. This time, they asked me if I'd accept an appreciation ribbon for years of service to the harbor. I said yes, not because I needed a ribbon, because I needed a microphone just once, and I meant to use it to show people a piece of paper instead of a brand. The week before Harbor Day behaved the way August weeks do when the weather holds its breath. The walk-in held steady at 2 degrees. I logged it, I ordered extra cream, checked the seals on the Cambros, and bought more rosemary than we needed because rosemary forgives forgetfulness. I called the bank manager and asked her to print, on letterhead, a short confirmation of our dual signature policy and the removal of sub-users. She did, and I picked it up, slid it into the red folder so the bank tab caught it like a good hand. I called the broker and asked for a letter clarifying again. Dates, policy numbers, my name is named insured, that events, tastings, and brand activations, the phrase made him cough, were not covered without my written approval. He printed it. I tucked it under the insurance tab. I called the licensing office. The clerk printed the sheet that differentiates incidental music in a licensed dining room from events requiring permits. That went under liquor. I called environmental health. The inspector sent a brief note confirming our last inspection passed and restating that sampling must occur at the pass with hand wash access. Health. I printed a draft of the family trust the lawyer and I had been shaping, conditions on room rates, emergency feeding obligations, trustee signatures required for any change in model, and put that under trust, not to wave around, but to remind myself that even when the noise goes away, the structure remains. The morning of Harbor Day, I was up before the kettle could resent me. The air had that clean intention only mornings know. I set the chowder to a whisper on the back burner and made the brown bread with attention I might one day, if I am lucky, apply to prayer. Evan took the early deliveries and carried them without making a scene of his back. He counted the till and read the Z report aloud. Not because I needed to hear it, but because the habit of saying numbers out loud does something to a man who has spent his life trusting mood over math. Talia checked rooms and set out extra towels. She left her phone on the shelf for 2 hours and didn't twitch. I noticed. I did not perform my noticing. I dried the spoons. At noon, I walked down to the green to check our spot at the supper tent. The committee chair, a woman born with the voice of a boatswain, pointed me to a table near the center. "You're Station 4 this year," she said. "Ladle and smile." "I can do both," I said, and she laughed like we were old enough to know how to bend a day toward kindness. The sponsor rep found me under the tent and handed me a crisp, apologetic note. A retail partnership proposal for packaged non-alcoholic mixers, ingredient list visible, liability language clean, a small, boring discount. I told him to send the certificate naming Harbor House as additional insured and to expect nothing more glamorous than a shelf beside the jam. He smiled like a man discovering that respect is a more stable pleasure than attention. By late afternoon, the green had filled with the town. Men with caps that recall other boats, women whose laughs have saved more evenings than power ever will, children in shirts that will stain for memory. The mayor arrived in the chain of office that looks foolish, until you remember where authority is supposed to come from. The priest stood with his hands folded and untroubled. The stage held the committee, the microphone, and an anxious stand of geraniums. I stood behind the tent for a minute and watched. A gull dropped an opinion on an awning. The air held. The sea looked like a thing you could trust for an hour. I thanked it anyway. When it was time, the chair called my name. I wiped my hands on my apron because that is what my hands know to do when people watch. I climbed the 3 steps that make a stage and turned toward the town. I did not raise a hand. I did not perform humility. I am a woman with a red folder and a plan. The mayor pinned the ribbon on my shoulder. The pin bit and then held. The chair said a few kind sentences about keeping us fed when storms were rude. The priest offered a blessing that included soup, which felt like a theological advance. Then the chair said, "Clara has something to share, quick and practical, the way she likes it." The microphone came to me. It felt heavier than a ladle and less honest. I leaned a little away from it and let my voice ride the air. "I'll keep this short," I said. "We get hungry if I don't." Smiles moved like small birds. There's been confusion, understandable, fixable confusion about what Harbor House is and what it is not. I'd like to clear it up once so we don't have to argue when the soup needs stirring. I opened the red folder the way I opened the pass, towel under, certainty above. "This is not drama," I said. "This is policy." I held the bank letter up so the front row could see the letterhead. Transfers above $500 require 2 signatures, no exceptions. If your name is not under the word owner, you'll need mine beside it to move money. A chuckle, the kind that forgives, a low, approving sound from the older men who respect a rule that keeps a room upright. "Insurance," I said, and lifted the broker's letter. "We are covered for what we do. Licensed dining room, 6 rooms, chowder and bread, and the occasional guitar leaned in the corner while people chew. We are not covered for events or tastings or brand activations." I let the terrible phrase sit in the sun until it felt embarrassed. If you are asked to bring bottles to my house, don't. If you are promised a bar under string lights at our door, you are promised fiction. "Licensing," I said, tapping the provincial form. "Incidental music is allowed. Ticketed events are not. If you want to hear a fiddle, you can, so long as your spoon doesn't get confused about its job. If you want a concert, the town has halls. We want you to eat." "Health," I said, and lifted the inspection report with its neat initials still clean. "Sampling at the pass, hand wash access, no pop-up anything." The priest smiled. The chair nodded like a woman who likes courtesy inside rules. "And finally," I said, lowering the papers but keeping the folder open because I needed to feel it looking up at me, "name." I pointed toward the green where, if you squinted and pretended to be a camera, the house could be mistaken for a set. Harbor House is a house. My name is carved into the sign my husband hung when our son still climbed chairs to reach into the breadbasket. The name on the registration is mine. If you see Harbor House events by... followed by anyone's mood, know it is a mood only. We sell rooms and soup, not announcements. I didn't mention Evan or Talia. Harbor Day isn't for chastising your children. It's for teaching them where the fence is so they can stop bruising their shins. But I used the sentence I had saved, the one that would let us all breathe. We'll be posting our policy by the door this week. It's 3 lines, and I'll read them now. 1. 2 signatures on transfers over 500 and on supplier contracts. 2. No events, no tastings, no brand activations, ever, without posted permits and my written approval. 3. Our rooms remain affordable. Our dining room remains a dining room, and in a storm, anyone in uniform eats first. I put the papers back into the folder and closed it like you close a stove when you know the bread will finish with the heat you've already given it. I said I'd be short, I added. The soup forgives a lot. It doesn't forgive lateness. I stepped down. The ribbon scratched my neck. I left it there. People clapped, not like fans, like neighbors who prefer knowing where to stand. After the speeches, after the priest's hands lifted and lowered, and we remembered to say, "Amen," like a town that means it, I walked back to our station. Evan met me halfway, face open. He didn't apologize into a microphone. He handed me a towel. "Station 4 is slipping behind," he said, and we ladled without performing penance. News travels soft in Lunenburg. By the time we stacked the last chairs, my phone had 3 messages from people I have rented rooms to in bad weather. "Proud of you, Clara," one read. "We'll bring friends." The sponsor texted the certificate. I sent it to the broker. The broker approved. Talia posted a photo of the posted policy sign, framed without flourish, with this caption, "We feed. See you at the table." There were no hashtags. There was no grid. I took off my ribbon and pinned it to the corkboard above my desk like a relic of a religion that had decided to prefer rules over icons. Consequences, when you've done your paperwork, tend to behave. The Craft Spirits Company sent the first case of mixers. We put them on a shelf beside the jam with a small card that said, "Local, non-alcoholic, ingredients you can pronounce." We sold enough to know the shelf wasn't a mistake, and not so many that anyone wanted to install a dance floor. The bank mailed a second letter, slower than email, more satisfying, confirming the month's first attempted transfer had flagged properly and waited for my second signature. I signed it with a pen that no longer shook. The licensing office sent a plain email. "Thank you for your continued compliance." I printed it and let the white of the paper cool my nerves. The health inspector dropped by for coffee and bought a bowl on her own dime. She asked after Nana, which is a kind of inspection I respect. Evan made his first repayment on the 1st of the month. The note said nothing dramatic, installment 1, and the number matched the plan. He signed up for a Saturday sanitation course at the community college and left the printout on my desk without expecting a ceremony. He took the dish pit twice that week because the teenager who usually carried that duty had a tournament in Bridgewater. He did not tell anyone online that he had learned the grace of bleach. Talia came in on Tuesday with her hair tied back and a stack of business cards that simply read, "Harbor House, Clara McKinnon, rooms and chowder." "I paid for these myself," she said. "I put your name where it belongs." "Thank you," I said, and meant it the way a person means a thing because it is finally small enough to be true. Some of what changed was not public and will never trend. We rewrote our staff manual with the clarity of people who have learned what ambiguity costs, where the allergen card sits, how to refuse a donation of live entertainment with kindness, who has keys to what, how to manage a complimentary bowl without tweeting it. We added a clause to our onboarding that said, "This is a house, not a stage. If you need to be seen to believe you matter, stand closer to the sink." The teenagers laughed, and then they stopped laughing, and then they wrote their names on the schedule and came on time. The trust moved from draft to ink. We signed in the lawyer's office where her fern refuses drama and wept exactly once when I read aloud the clause about feeding crews in storms. Trustees, me for now, Nora because numbers need a steward, and, when she agreed, Rita, because she knows how to say no so kindly, you want to bring her a pie. The trust title will hold the property when I am ready to stop pretending a ladder is my hobby. The conditions are posted in the office. Rate caps pinned to a calendar. No event conversion. Winter priorities listed like commandments we can keep. There was one apology I owed and one I didn't. I went to Nana with a jar of lemon sauce and told her I had used her birthday as a shield for my policy. She snorted in a way that makes children straighten their spines. "That's exactly what a birthday is for," she said. "Write your rules where people will be too polite to argue." I did not owe the town an apology for using Harbor Day to make a public notice out of my boundaries. We trade in notices here. Weather, fish, road work. A mother's policy belongs under the same thumbtack. When I said earlier that endings don't thunder, I wasn't trying to be pretty. I meant the kind of ending that keeps a life from unraveling. The one I love best arrived on a Wednesday morning when the rooms were half checked out and the soup had not yet demanded its first stir. Evan came in the back door, not sneaking, carrying a box of paper towels on one shoulder and a loaf of bread under the other arm. He set them down, washed his hands properly without me fussing, and reached for the knife. "You want heels cut or slices?" he asked. "Slices," I said, and he cut with the kind of attention a person gives a task when he understands that someone will eat what he does. He didn't ask if he could film it. He didn't say a word about optics. He cut, and the kitchen made the sound I have come to trust more than applause. Work. Now for the part you asked me to include, the comment that is not paperwork. People call what happened revenge because they have read too many stories that like sharp edges more than clean tables. I did not humiliate my son or my daughter-in-law. I humiliated the idea that Polish can replace permission. I did not choose spectacle. I chose a policy posted by the door in the same hand that writes the soup of the day. The older I get, the less I believe in winning. I believe in setting the table so people can sit down without tripping over your pride. I believe in putting names where they belong and letting paperwork absorb what would otherwise spill into a room that deserves quiet. My voice is not especially loud. It does not need to be now that there is a sign that says, "We sell rooms and soup." We do not sell announcements. If you were waiting for a dramatic ending where I slam a door and someone outside wails, I can only offer you this: the cling of blue painter's tape when I posted the policy by the door, the pen scratching my initials on a bank letter that says, "Money will not wander off on charm." The soft thump of a mixer bottle settling onto a shelf where it will either leave or remain based on the only truth that matters here. Does it serve the room? The way the floor sounds after a mop has been honest. It's small music. It's enough. We're steady now. We serve chowder and bread and a pace that undoes a person without humiliating them. Tourists still ask for things we will not give them. Tables by windows that don't exist. Wire-free sunsets, the feeling of being discovered in a town that has been here all along. We answer with bowls and kindness and rules. The sign outside remains plain. The ribbon fades into the corkboard and will one day fall. The thumbtack will outlast it. The red folder is thinner because much of its heft has been translated into a laminated sheet by the door that any staff member can point to when someone's mood pretends to be a plan. If this story put steel in your back or calm in your hands, if it reminded you that you can be heard without shouting, tell me. Like this, if it made you feel less alone at your own counter. Subscribe if you want more quiet, stubborn stories about women who run rooms with policies and ladles instead of microphones and moods. And comment, have you ever had to turn a family idea into posted rules? What did you write on your sign? Who signed your letter? How did the room change once paper carried the message? If it helped, share this with the loudest person in your group chat, the one who needs to learn how to be useful in a dish pit. There will be another story when the wind shifts and the first fall tourists come in with sweaters and relief. I'll be here, apron clean, policy posted, soup ready.